Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Fake Accents Unite. I hope that this finds you well. I am noticing that I'm suddenly very quiet once again on the old mic output, so please bear with me whilst I sort out the levels here. There we go. There we go. That should be better. Okay. I don't know.
I'm definitely turning us down now because otherwise I will have eardrum damage by the end of this.
I don't know. I do not know why, but my microphone, on occasion, is known to default to, like 43% on its level. I have no idea why this number is chosen. I have no idea what the cause is for it to add. You know, I don't unplug my headphones. And I don't mess around with the cables or anything. I don't mess around with the settings for it. So it's very, very bizarre. Very bizarre.
These are the mysteries of technology.
Indeed.
It's the same reason I text you asking you whether you're about to SN or whatever. And you just go,
NG.
I'm about to what?
About to NG.
I don't even know what it was anymore. But yes, my mobile phone has now taken to garbling things, and one or two people since have tweeted me and said, no, my mobile is doing the same thing. So yes, anybody who's blessed with a Motorola mobile at the moment seems to be having trouble tweeting.
I haven't, that's what you have when you have a Motorola Razr from 2002, Britisher. That's all I have to say to that. Do you remember that?
Well, I mean,
do you remember that
mine
phone?
Is still steam powered. I would let you know.
Still, well, just because you've made some upgrades and modifications doesn't mean that it's anything like industry standard. I simply choose to believe that you're working now on such a level that your typing simply got ahead of your fingers, but or your fingers got ahead of the technology of the time, so it barely detected.
When I type, just about every second or third word is, incorrect. Now,
Britisher, you are very old.
Well, there is that. But most of them you can simply just sort of have it autocorrect itself with autocorrect. I think, no, I meant this, But some of them autocorrect doesn't recognize, so you kind of try and go in there and correct them. And at the moment when you try to do that, it will then suddenly jumble the syllables up, or it will move the word elsewhere in the sentence, or it will even suddenly duplicate the whole sentence for no reason whatsoever. So it's a bit like your level 43.
The way I look at it then, your phone is dyslexic, and you should stop being such a bigot and anti-disability, you abled so-and-so. That's what it is.
I am once again falling victim to my own bigotry.
Yes, exactly. These are just different spellings, Britisher. There is no right, there is no wrong. Don't be ridiculous. So, you don't know how to respond to that. Right, so, welcome everybody to the show. Lovely to see some of the regulars in there. I do notice, for instance, that we've got a couple of our channel members in there. If you are a channel member, you can use a new emote that I have added simply by typing uwu, that be UWU, in chat. You can make an uwuisher emote appear on the chat screen, and you can spam those as much as you would like. For those of you who are not as blessed as to have access to this emote, it's only £2 to become a channel member, don't you know? Anyway, enough of the shameless self-promotion. As I say, Britisher, did you ever think when you signed up to this show, 2 or 3 years ago now, and agreed to have
mentally abused and tormented in this way?
And agreed?
No, I never thought of it.
Yes,
I thought we were having a quiet chat about tea. That's all I thought that was.
Just a single chat about tea. Oh, why is this called Fake Accents Unite? Oh, is this going to be a regular thing? Oh, do you really think we could talk for 3 hours about tea? Why, yes, Britisher, I have a plan for you that defies...
Wasn't it already called Fake Accents Unite when we talked about tea?
It was called Fake Accents Unite from the very first iteration, as it were.
Ladies and gentlemen, do you believe him? I'm not sure. He might be lying.
I have to go back now. Like, we have to check. I have to see whether or not it's there. Although I do believe I've privated an awful lot of the old Fake Accents Unite. I nearly typed.
So obscene. It was so obscene and riddled with swear words and.
Riddled with swear words? You are remembering
it just became too explicit.
You are remembering.
It just became too sexually explicit, and therefore he no doubt thought he had to private.
Look, it was all your fault. You and your full penetrative sex that, you know.
Well, there was that, but then there was also your sort of very crass descriptions about yourself and the ladies' netball teams.
No, those are descriptions that you made of yourself. You have created a law for me which has me as some kind of netball team connoisseur, despite the fact that I have neither watched netball nor follow the sport in any way, and make me out to be some kind of...
Who says you should have any interest in netball?
Well, you know, if you wanted to pick out the choicest teams, Britisher, one would surely ascertain that you would need to have some kind of passing interest in the sport.
I do not take any interest in the sport. It's just basically you interact, and then what can I say? Your reputation goes before you. They tell each other.
I see how.
As we all know, as the Japanese organizer of the Olympic Games made quite clear that once women start talking, they can't shut up.
Well, and the Britisher is off to a fine start, letting out loose his inner sexist.
Yes, I mean he was forced to resign, which was a bit of a shame. I mean, he was this chap who was in his 80s. He was a former Japanese prime minister. He was only basically saying what he thought. It wasn't really doing anyone any harm. And what exactly did one expect a former Japanese 80-odd prime minister to think?
And let's face it, it's not the worst thing that 80-year-old Japanese people have said in the past. When we
I think that's again
when we think
fair.
about certain cities in China and all sorts. But
or South Korea,
South Korea, yes, or indeed, has anyone ever wondered why the Japanese own, the color black is so prevalent among the Japanese hair color? It didn't involve anything dodgy. Couldn't possibly be a genocide of eugenic proportions. So yeah, but that aside. I had no plans whatsoever to talk about this evening. I have this whole little list of tidbits and topics.
He had the audacity to say that he wasn't really very interested in women contributing to meetings or something like that because they get very competitive. So if one of them puts her hand up, they all put their hand up because they all want to compete with each other. And basically, once they start, they never shut up. And you just said, well, okay, it's an opinion. But what exactly, in what way exactly does it disqualify him of, from running the Olympic Games, which so far he's already organised?
Yeah, it's not like there's an event on speaking that he will be judging, right?
Yeah, precisely.
This is much like.
It's not as if he hasn't already organised it.
Indeed.
The only reason it hasn't been held yet is because of COVID. So, I mean, it would otherwise have already been held last year. So everything is already done. So he's done all the work.
Well, it's not like it reminds me of Roger Scruton having divisive political views, getting knocked off an architectural committee when the man is was the authority on such a thing. It reminds me as well of...
He was an advisor to the government on architecture. but because he has the wrong views, off he goes, and you think, well, what exactly has that got to do with anything? But
it also reminds me of a particular segment on QI from years ago, where Jack D is sitting there, and they're saying, Stephen Fry poses the question, what is it about women that's different to men or something, and the two female comedians go back and forth and talk, and Jack D just goes, is it because when they get started they won't shut up? Just completely deadpan in the way that he does, and of course uproarious laughter, and very well received, just as a joke, but no one was calling for him to be, thrashed and lose his job and lose any corporate sponsorships. Oh, quite certainly. Which would be a real shame, because it was just very funny.
I think, was it yesterday or yesterday or the day before, I had a sort of, how should we say, a gentle coming together on Twitter, in which, once more there was some purple-haired entity telling us that cancel culture didn't really exist.
Oh, yes.
And I asked him how then it was that Mel Brooks thinks that his films couldn't be made today.
Yes.
Whereby I was then assured that, well, of course he could. Of course he could still make them today.
No, he wouldn't. Blazing Saddles would not have been made in today.
There would be one or two things that would not be acceptable and would have to be changed, but of course he could make them today.
They wouldn't have been made unless they were changed. Thus they were changed, thus they wouldn't have been made.
So unless it's changed, they don't get made. So that just proves the point, doesn't it? But yes, this is the level at which you have to deal with these people. That basically, no, of course it could be made. But there's nothing to say it couldn't be made. It would have to be different, but it could be made.
If I write a book, and the book deals with serious content matter, and is non-fiction, and I have to change it to a fictional title a historical fictional title instead, in order to get it published, am I publishing the same book? No. So it's just ludicrous. Speaking of cancel culture, are you aware of an actress named Gina Carano?
I am aware, yes, of the deeply hateful anti-Semitic harridan.
Yes.
Was that the correct answer?
That is the YouTube appropriate answer. Yes. So there's an article from Louis Chilton, and it says Gina Carano's Mandalorian exit proves that cancel culture doesn't exist, despite what her fans say.
Yes, I saw that. That was in the I can't say it. In the Independent, wasn't it?
In the Indie, yeah. The controversy hit star of Disney's Star Wars spin-off is being held up by some as a victim of cancel culture, but the phrase is all too often used to avoid accountability. Like, how much is Disney taking a hit over the statements that Gina Carano makes? That is the question. Because,
well, put it like this. Because
this is
I didn't. So did you know this woman existed prior to this story?
Yes, but she is very popular at the moment because the closest thing to a non-SJW Star Wars series is The Mandalorian at the moment, and that's what she's a very popular character on that. So it's one of Disney's hits at the moment for their Star Wars IP, and but it is only available on Disney Plus, as I understand it. So it's, a smaller subsection of Disney fans and Mandalorian fans. A lot of people, I assume, are subscribed to the series just for subscribed to Disney Plus just for Mandalorian. And then you have this small comportment of screaming people who trying to claim at the moment that what she said was anti-Semitic. For context, to the people who don't know what this is all about, Gina Carano tweet. She made a tweet which said, where is this? On Instagram, which said, Jews were beaten in the streets, not by Nazi soldiers, but by their neighbours, even by children. Sad face. Because history is edited, most people today don't realise that to get to the point where Nazi soldiers could easily round up thousands of Jews, the government first made their own neighbours hate them simply for being Jewish. How is that any different from hating someone for their political beliefs? Now, do you take any issue with this particular statement or comparison in and of itself in terms of what I see as a conceptualization of a slippery slope kind of position?
I mean, she's just simply, she's using a sort of a Nazi metaphor, and there is nothing wrong with that. Obviously these days we're kind of told, not to use Nazi metaphors too much because it's a bit cliche, and at the same time because you're always dialing everything to 100. But as such, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And the idea that it's anti-Semitic is ridiculous. What she's trying to do is she's trying to make a point, and she does make the point. But yes, they've somehow twisted this.
She's also like the thing people are forgetting, aside from anything else, like what were the Jews demonized as during World War II? So like all the usual stereotypes. They're greedy, they're in control of everything, they're messing with you, they control the banks, and therefore you're poor and it's their fault, etc., etc., etc. And then you look at but it's got to have started somewhere, right? It's not just like they didn't go from naught to genocide in the course of a week, right? It's got to start somewhere, and it starts with demonizing and dehumanizing your opponents. And at its core level, all she's doing is saying, you are dehumanizing us, and I don't like that. She is also, she come under fire. Disney wanted to get rid of her, it seems, according to what the New York Post calls inside sources, but no one's named, obviously. That they wanted to get rid of her for a while after she was effectively said that she had been bullied over and over and over and over again by the alphabet people, the trans mob particularly, to put her pronouns in her bio. She refused pretty much through the whole thing, and then eventually put beep bop boop or something like that in her Twitter bio. Which of course was then strung into a story that she was mocking trans people, but she just said, no, I am exposing the bullying mentality of the mob that has taken over the voices of genuine causes. Absolutely accurate, very sympathetic to that sort of thing. The idea of putting pronouns in a bio is a ridiculous concept, just in general. It doesn't validate anything.
But what effectively happened was that she was then on their radar, and I think it's fair to say that they are these days pretty much the worst of the militants online. And once they decided that they would follow her every tweet and check every single word, every syllable she said, to see whether they couldn't somehow interpret it to be something negative. Once she was in that position, then there was no, there was no getting away from it. So I think if it wouldn't have been this Nazi metaphor, it would have been something else they would have got it for. Because I would say that the most, let's face it, the most spiteful minority on social media had it in for her.
Yeah, I mean, she was...
And that most spiteful minority also happens to be one of the highest on the progressive stack at the moment.
She was an anti-masker, and they didn't like that. She was obviously just anti-identity politics, and so not particularly a fan of that. Didn't like being dehumanized, and so made a post about that. And, of course, she suffers consequences for standing up for herself. I believe the Critical Drinker, of all people, made quite a nice little short 5-minute diatribe on his channel about her being a strong woman, and basically the trope of the women that Hollywood wishes it could create in its films. You know, someone who stands up for themselves, stands up for the little guy, and actually embodies something of kind of moral character, as opposed to anything else. So that's worth a watch if you've got the time. But it's just like, I look at it and it's ludicrous that they can say, you know, the fact that she was cancelled is proof that it isn't cancel culture, just because she offended some people who either this is like Disney's core base. It is Disney's base is only people now, because they've alienated everyone else. They're only catering to this like massively woke, politically correct crowd who want nothing to do with this. Note, of course, as well that these people are like the people who are following her on Instagram and Twitter and so on are people who, you know, presumably are following her either for updates about the show and what she's up to, obviously the usual horny posters, and people who are, you know, in favour of her position. Which means that people, you know, the hate mob has gone out of its way, as it always does, to try and hunt out these things and destroy them wherever they find them.
Well, see, the thing is that everything that is mainstream now, according to the logic of the media, and the logic of the media hasn't changed that much over time, really, but the logic of the media simply is you placate those who complain. And
yes, how many? But you look at it and you go,
you know, the question is simply what type of people complain and what type of people don't. Now, the overwhelming majority do not complain.
They don't.
There is a poisonous minority. I mean, I don't know who it was anymore, but I remember some 25 years ago or so reading an article by some journalist saying it should really be our civic duty to write into every programme on the BBC, to any newspaper, complaining that in their article there wasn't enough swearing, there wasn't enough nudity, there wasn't enough references to violence, there wasn't enough, because that would create the healthy counterbalance to the idiots that otherwise write in.
But I mean, I can understand it somewhat with when it's like the BBC, right? Because they've got just no moral compass and no profit motive. So when 12 people write in and complain about a segment, it's enough to get the whole thing taken down. But you'd think, you know, Disney being as enormous and faceless as it is, it would, you know, because you can't imagine that they're completely stupid.
Sort of corporate entity as the BBC.
You look at them and you go, like, why can you not see that there is going to be enough backlash from you axing one of the favourite characters of the actual people who watch your show, that you know, you're actually going to lose more money from this in the long run. But I suppose, you know, Disney having to take its own moral stances now, just like every other big corporation is.
Every corporation has values, and what values would you sooner have? Would you sooner be a company that you know, protects anti-Semites, or would you be one that must take a hit for being seen as you know, hostile to conservatives, but at least not anti-Semitic, pro-Nazi, and you know, hateful of LGBTQ plus and whatever else? I mean, that's their calculation. That's the calculation.
I know, but it's a stupid calculation.
Yes,
because all you need to do is put out the standard statement that we are not going to we're not going to react to baseless fear-mongering, but also baseless attacks, evidenceless slurs and slandering of our stars and misrepresenting them. But no, that would require them to have a backbone. I've been thinking about this actually. About
if they can make her comment out to be anti-Semitic, what would they make out that comment that you just fielded to be?
Exactly. Yeah, apologism for anti-Semitism. I know, especially given Walt Disney's history. Blah 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 blah. Oh, it's clearly filtered down. Disney has still got just as much of a toxic anti-Semitic atmosphere as it did when Walt Disney was at the helm. Blah 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 blah. And I'm just sick of it. And whilst I'm not advertising, I'm not Well, I'm not advocating for any kind of measures, but there are some people who just need to be sectioned, rather than anything else. Okay, I have been thinking about this actually in terms of the ways in which businesses function, and because there's a statistic that I can't remember where I got it from, but I think it's America. And it was basically talking about, the proportion of tax that was paid by different businesses and the proportion of small businesses to large businesses in the US. And how basically, I won't quote the exact figures because I can't remember them exactly and I can't verify them for you. But the trend was that before, larger businesses were a smaller part of the economy. The vast majority of the tax was paid by small business, as you can imagine, and then over time, as you've kind of these enormous multinationals and obviously time has progressed. For whatever reason, that has shrunk now, and corporations pay more tax. And there are less small businesses. So that was basically the general trend. And I was thinking about this, at what point when you're growing a business, because obviously you get people like Jeff Bezos, right, who owns Amazon, one of the richest men in the world, and then he has built this company. He has obviously started it from scratch. It's now a multi-billion. It's like the 11th largest economy in the world if you slot it in next to countries and that sort of thing. Some of the things that my housemate who works for them says are really quite scary, just because Amazon is, in terms of its corporate culture, is utterly obsessed with absorbing every single business in the known world so that everything eventually becomes Amazon. They'll say it plainly to you. So there's that. But you wonder how much Jeff Bezos' intention at the beginning, when he started a company presumably to provide products for people, was to do that. How much he's in control of the current company and so on. And much like this, especially notable with companies where the original founders have passed on, and now it's in the hands of people with different ethos. It's not in the hands of a single visionary. It's in the hands of a board of directors, a management class as well, who are just trying to keep things going. And I'm going, at what point, at what size does the corporation or the company become completely unaccountable? At what point does it lose sight of what it was originally there to do in favour of these kind of strange broad brush appeal things? Like the average coffee shop that started independently is not thinking about how it can best present itself as non-transphobic to the general media, to the general public. It is trying to produce coffee in a way which sells, that is popular, and so on. It's not making these big statements. They might have a social media account where they retweet something here and there, but that's generally just the founder's moral ethos and etc. So it's different, right?
I would say it's at that point where you need to start delegating these things to others. Because if you are the founder and you have your own ethos, as you say, then you kind of control that. But by the time it becomes so big that you can't possibly oversee that, there's too many press statements and whatever that you would have to make, and you're too busy running an actual company. The person you bring in will then not be a sort of carbon copy of your ethos. Instead, they will then sort of apply the this is the present corporate way of doing it, and that's how suddenly all of them then become clones of each other. I mean, one would hope they could just forget this hypocritical nonsense and just admit that they're in business to make money, and forget telling us that they're here to save the world and enrich us with their values.
Well, yes,
because I think it's one of the things that annoys us all most.
Well, what is it? You had the if we just go back to the original source of this, which is the Gina Carano story. The biggest issue was, of course, like people hitting back, going, "You filmed Mulan just a few miles down the road from the Uyghur concentration camps in China." Disney, there was no backlash over that. There was no defense. You literally supported a genocidal dictatorship, and no one batted an eye. But one of your stars made a post which went against the grain for some of your supporters and some of your viewers. Presumably they are viewers as well, because we all know how this goes. Half the people who are attacking I don't know, J.K. Rowling have probably never read Harry Potter, right?
I mean, it would be a nice thing to be able to do, to put the CEO of Disney on the spot and say, so who's worse in your opinion, given your company's values, this Carano woman or Xi Jinping?
Yeah, exactly, right.
I mean, given that you wish to let us know about these things because we need to know about your values, could you please enlighten us? But yeah, I mean, we all know that never happens.
Yeah. Right. Let's crack on with some super chats then. I think we've kind of done this topic a little bit to death, but and I'm not sure what my voice did there, but rest assured it was just amusement. Ratface said, "What can I say except you're welcome?" Oh, what a surprise! I was singing that to the British. For for him agreeing to come on the show once again. Sitskoen for $20, thank you Sitskoen, says, "Notice the overwhelming generosity I shall now show the eternally late, except for that one time he was 67 seconds early, not so obvious. I have ignored the time he was late a week ago. No mercy this week, 120 seconds. Your failure is noted, as always." Thank you, Sitskoen. The eternal clock.
Have you ever noticed how Sitskoen, he must have one of those, hand wind-up watches? Because we're always on time.
I know.
It's more than happy how sometimes, with those wind-up watches in cold weather and so on, they run a little differently. I mean, clearly his watch is running, running ahead. We've never been late. It's a blatant lie.
At the risk of sowing division between the two of us, British, I am always on time. I sit here. Everyone who is in the Discord, join the Discord, by the way.
Just a second.
Can see that I'm sitting in here on my lonesome.
I think I've spotted a technical flaw in your argument.
Go on.
That proves that you're making this up.
It proves it, does it? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, go on.
Yes, because you're claiming to your audience that I am a brain in a jar, and I am in your office on a shelf.
I mean, your location varies.
So how could I possibly not already be there?
You're a time traveller. You have no excuse. At least according to the law. Oh, dear. All right. Well, as I say, without stoking division between us, British, but you are always late. Sorry, I'm just abusing myself now. Moving on. Thank you ever so much to Autocharth and Tom of Loxley for becoming supporters, which you could do for as little as £2 by clicking the join button down below, and it gives you access to a host of delightful emotes, including the new Iwuisher, that's UWUisher emote, which I'm putting in chat right now. If you are a channel member, please feel free to spam that in the chat to support the channel. Thank you ever so much.
I told you that I hate you.
Yes, almost on a weekly occurrence, and yet you are like, it's because it's much easier to meme you with your pith helmet, your ridiculous monocle, and red stripy uniform than it is.
No, I think it's quite easy to make a meme of Ivan Rebrov.
Yeah, I was going to say, rather than paint me as a man in an enormous.
Not that you haven't got a character.
Then to meme me as an enormous man in a bearskin jacket with a Russian hat singing folk songs with a German accent. Anakin Cringewalker says, "Insult the progressives in French. Progressives can't cancel what they don't understand, and French Twitter is anti-SJW and will like all your tweets. Win-win." Yes, but you failed to realise, Anakin Cringewalker, that this requires you to insult people in the language of the cheese-eating surrender monkey. That's my commentary on that. Any commentary from the Britisher?
No.
No. Ratface says, "It's frozen here in Texas. Thanks, global warming." It's still, it's gone mild here. I don't know how things are up your way, Britisher, in terms of the heat. But best.
Well, what the people in Texas don't seem to understand it's this warming freezing. That's what they don't understand. But I mean, people who know more about it understand that the type of freezing that they're currently witnessing is a different kind of freezing, the freezing that would indicate that things are cold.
Britisher also happens to be a flat earther, I'll have you know, but only because he's been to
all
all
very
corners of the
technical.
disc. Sorry, what was that?
I was just saying it was all very technical and therefore just simply beyond the comprehension of most, except for 16-year-old non-schoolgirls.
That Indian dude says, controversial take here. And it's controversial because it's completely unrelated to what we've been talking about, but we'll take it as it is. Libertarians and ANCAPs, so anarcho-capitalists, are fertile grounds for white nationalist recruitment. The academic agent comment section is a prime example. I think when you get very angry, disaffected people and they are offered... I don't know whether or not it's... I think it's very easy for people to get frustrated with libertarianism and ANCAPs just because they can be fairly insufferable. There's a lot of not very pragmatic solutions. A lot of stuff which sounds good in theory, but no one would accept in practice.
I don't know what you mean. I mean, I have this policy whereby... as we introduce it, 3/4 of the population starve to death, but thereafter it will be 1.25% more efficient than the system we're presently running.
Britishers straw men aside. Possibly. But it's also, it's kind of like... people misconstrue libertarianism to be something it isn't. People construe anarcho-capitalism to be something it isn't. It doesn't match up with their expectations. And then that's when they get got by...
Those two groups also like to play Mott and Bailey quite a lot.
I also don't think it helps that these two groups like to... because when it comes to white nationalist recruitment, the thing which... white nationalist kind of rhetoric is typically like, think for yourself, think with your instincts, and realize that the white identity is the pinnacle of all identity, and you should fight. And also we've got this kind of ethnic genocide thing going on, and people who are exploring the libertarian side of things are like, I'm having my mind opened up to all these new ideas. And different ways of doing things, and then the white nationalists go, well, you've been lied to your entire life by by everyone else. What else have you been lied to about? And that's when they get them. It doesn't help that a lot of these discussions take place in places on the internet which just are filled with people who... It's not just edgy humour, shall we say, but there's a reason why the first academic agent Discord had to be shut down. And that was because there was a splinter group of white nationalists trying to actively recruit people as a part of it. And when you end up discussing anything which dives heavily into economics and fringe economics, I think you'll always find the kind of the supremacists there, because the aside from anything else, there's elements of economics in all of their rhetoric. But that's just something you have to deal with. You have to be vigilant against it, and basically have all the appropriate, the right counters to it as usual. But it becomes very difficult because you can't police everywhere. And I realise I'm sounding like a kind of content cop right now, but much more. Yeah. Anyway, your point is you feel like it's fertile ground for white nationalist recruitment. I would say that's more to do with the fact that people who are going to identify themselves as libertarians and ANCAPs are much more likely to be exploring new ideas, and therefore they're open, as it were, to being captured by the white supremacists, and they know it because they know how to frame their message as one of, this is actually something that's been hidden from you, a kind of hidden knowledge, and a kind of, all that jazz. So there we go.
Well, I would say it's more a matter of these groups are on the right, and they are on the right of the right, and as we know, the further right you go on the right of the right, sooner or later you end up in Looneyville. So yeah, I mean, the further across in that direction you go, the closer you get to that particular destination. So I don't think it's a matter of necessarily belonging to this particular group or that particular group. It's just the closer you get to the ledge, the more likely you're sort of going to fall off it.
Yeah. And there we are. You have both our positions on that now. Thank you, that Indian dude. I can see EC90 in chat saying white genocide is real. Ethnic and ethnographic replacement is real, but whether or not it is a genocide is another thing entirely. I think it's a misrepresentation to call it that. But yeah, anyway, cultural collapse is more apt, I would say. Anyway. That Indian dude again. Also, the current big tech is why I do not cheerlead free market capitalism. It's like a medieval peasant cheering on their feudal lord. Yeah, especially at the size that.
Well put. It's very well put, by the way.
At the size that corporations, but when corporations can no longer be reined in by national enterprise, and in fact when they are being regulated in ways where, favourably regulated. Let's put it that way, because the heavier the regulation, the harder it is for the smaller business to come up and challenge the bigger business. Basically the regulation that gets given to them is stuff they can handle. There's a place for regulation. To break up monopolies. There's a place for regulation to basically. To prevent crony capitalism, but the trouble is of course, under a laissez-faire system, all that happens is the corporation becomes as big as the state and effectively does the same thing. You only need to look at, even on a smaller scale, at things like mining towns and stuff like that, where no one owned anything, and it was all owned by the mining corporation and that sort of thing. Or you look at the way the fruit farms.
All to the company store. Yes.
Yes. Or you just look at the way fruit farms are run nowadays, where it's like, here, have a slave wage and.
I mean, there was an interesting series on Amazon Prime called "The Men Who Built America."
Oh right.
And it's well worth a watch if you are subscribed. Because you can watch it for free. There's quite a few episodes, and it sort of starts with Vanderbilt, the railway king.
Yep.
And then it goes into men like Rockefeller, Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, And these were sort of unbelievable giants, and you only realize just how rich they were when they translated into modern day wealth. So when J.P. Morgan bought out Carnegie, Carnegie walked away with the equivalent of over $300 billion today.
Yeah.
And of course, at that time, so you have people of such spectacular wealth that it's multiples of what the world's richest today have. And then you compare that to the fact that the people of the time were actually much poorer.
Yeah.
And then you get this incredible divide. But what is so fascinating is that at times these titans are fighting with each other, and they will basically deny themselves in order to deny someone else. So Rockefeller, fell out with certain train companies, and he didn't want to ship his oil on those trains.
Yeah.
So he built pipelines, but there were certain areas which the pipelines didn't reach, and he would still have to pay the railways to move his oil.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what does he do? He just closes down the refineries. Well, in that case, we'll just close down those refineries. I'm not shipping the oil on those railways.
Corporate politics.
So basically, he just puts thousands of people out of work. He closes down profitable businesses simply because this is my decision. And that's when you kind of realize how, when you let these sort of arch capitalists who basically own substantial chunks of the national economy. I mean, Rockefeller had all the oil. Yeah. Carnegie had all the steel. Vanderbilt had almost all the railways. So you let these guys loose, and then they suddenly start playing that sort of zero-sum game. And the population, I mean, they just get thrown into the meat grinder. They don't matter anymore. It's now between these entities to fight it out.
We're also in a strange position where everyone is emulating the Amazon model when it comes to these things. So whereas before you ended up with these great single product, let's call it that. I know it's not as simple as that, but let's call it a single product industry where someone's made an enormous amount of money. And then you take something like Amazon is today, which absorbs businesses on the expectation that they will be profitable. India's a really curious one. Because there's obviously less restrictions on Amazon in India. So Uber Eats was expanding into India. Do you know what Uber Eats is?
Well, there's the delivery service for takeaway shops.
Yes, right.
Bringing it to your front door. Yeah.
So so Amazon decided to that it would acquire Uber Eats. Made an offer to the Indian branch. The Indian branch said no. So Amazon decided that at a loss, it would set up Amazon Eats, effectively. I can't remember what it was actually called. And run that for 10 years and offer a better deal than Uber Eats was offering. Ran Uber Eats in India completely out of business, and then shut down Amazon Eats, and there's now like a competitor to Uber Eats that's rising. And when it becomes big enough, Amazon will attempt to acquire that, and if it can't, it will run the whole thing all over again.
Yes, it's the equivalent of dumping, isn't it?
So
basically, you run it at a loss because, like that, your smaller opponent won't be able to compete. He can't absorb the losses constantly because he hasn't got your size of balance sheet. And therefore, you can just do it, treat it as an investment, and eventually, once the other side is cold, you own the market.
Yep. Then there's the other thing on the other side, which is not Amazon related. But are you aware of a city called Jamshedpur? Or Tatanagar?
I can't say that I'm overly familiar with Jamshedpur.
Jamshedpur or Tatanagar. So it's the largest and most populous city in its region. but it's the first planned industrial city in India, and it is completely owned and founded by the Tata Group. So it's actually been around for 100 years, but Tata Group is one of the biggest corporations you've never heard of unless you actually live there.
Kind of steel and car maker, isn't it?
Yeah, it's got a hand in everything, pretty much. But everything there is Tata. So it's they're Tata shops and Tata barbers and Tata cars and Tata everything. So it's a very strange sort of situation.
What's the company called in the film Wall-E?
I don't know. I haven't seen Wall-E in years.
You haven't seen that film?
In years.
It's a sort of, well, I mean,
I know what it is.
It's a sort of dystopia, isn't it? Where they're all on spaceships.
Yes.
But if while Wall-E is kind of running around on the surface of the Earth, trying to clear up, you've got all the signs out, and it's all the same company. It's some kind of merged company, as though basically, eventually everything had boiled down to two companies, and they'd just merged. Maybe someone in the chat will know what the name of those companies was, but it was kind of sort of a running gag that everything had the same logo on it.
B&L, by and large. There you go. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yes. But yes, everything has that logo on it, and Jamshedpur is like that basically, which is curious enough. Tata owns Jaguar Land Rover, by the way, as Mark Holmes is mentioning in chat.
So it's basically a giant version of Saltaire, is it?
Saltaire?
Saltaire, it's in Yorkshire. It's a town that was built by, was it I'm not sure if it was a spinnery or something, or I think it was a chap called Salt or Salts, and he ran this giant factory, and he pretty much he decided, he was a very successful businessman, but also a philanthropist. But his idea of philanthropy was basically, I build a town of much better living quality for people, but then of course I call all the shots.
Right.
So yes, he was, he was one could say he was a philanthropist, but at the same time he was more than likely also a bit of a little dictator, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean he had 5.
Yes, he did build a quite beautiful little town.
Yes,
and it's called Saltaire, named after himself.
And the river,
as
yes.
you do.
Yes. I can see here he moved all his business there, 5 mills he had, and he moved them to this site to arrange everything. And yeah, it's now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, interestingly. So, yeah, because they're no longer, the mills aren't working there, but the village still is there.
Didn't Cadbury's in a way do something similar? I mean, they built Bourneville, didn't they? Have you heard of them?
I know Bourneville. I didn't know Bourneville was an actual place though.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah, a workers' village on the southwest side of Birmingham, founded by the Quaker Cadbury family for its employees at the factory. Yes. So these things aren't unprecedented, although Jamshedpur...
Mind you, I mean, that will be on a much smaller scale than what you're describing.
Yeah. Jamshedpur is obviously, city-size, not model village. But, it's a very strange state of affairs. And I don't know how to feel about it, because it is something that is happening. It's something that there is precedent for. It is something that is happening, especially in developing economies where it's a lot cheaper to make it happen. And the potential for, shall we call it, a social credit system of sorts emerging under a corporate model doesn't put me in favour when it's like, well, you know, the free speech is
you
protected.
Town.
You're protected in terms of your free speech by the government, but whether or not a corporation chooses to associate with you, it's like, but when that corporation is controlling your transport, healthcare, all of your social interactions, your heating, gas, water, electric, all that stuff. At what point does it become too much?
If you own the town, then just that's what I meant with Saltaire.
Yeah.
He built everything in the town that you would expect to find in a town, except one thing.
Go on.
What did he not build?
I don't know.
A pub.
A pub? He didn't build a pub? What a shame.
Oh, no. That was no.
Haram.
That was unacceptable. So do you understand what I mean? So you then get these values foisted upon you by the chap who owns the place.
Yeah.
And that's in a way, I mean, perhaps, you know, with the chap who is a teetotaler and decides that nobody should fall for the sinful drink, you know, it's a little silly and perhaps it's a bit charming. But yes, if you have a large city on a grand scale, and particularly when these corporations then start getting sort of, you know, delusions of grandeur of trying to tell us what their values are, that's when it gets quite scary, when they own everything and reserve the right to choose whether they wish to associate with you or not.
Yes. Well, you can always...
Because that's when you can be starved out of the system.
You know, and I think at this point, you know, the libertarian arguments fall a little bit flat, especially when he goes, you know, abandon everything. If it's that unpalatable to you, abandon everything and move somewhere else. And then you go, but that we know that there is a cabal of people. You know, let's say at some point in history, you know, effectively every city is like that. There are no free cities left, so you have to pick one which is a closer approximation. I mean, you have to do that. If
there still is a place where you can go to, why should you just allow your country to be taken over by such a cabal as you describe it?
Yes.
You know, based on the idea that, well, if you don't like it, you can go elsewhere.
It's like, no, we don't like it. You can go elsewhere. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So, yes, and this is why, as I say, government is important, because it is both a gatekeeper to these people and rolling out the red carpet, and there needs to be some form of accountability. But it's, you know, how much accountability you can actually give them at this stage is one of those things. Are we in the death of empire just from the base of this? Who knows? Right, Ashes of Civilization. Anyway, Alpha Omega Record says it's not the gays or alphabet people doing this absolute insanity. For the most part, it's young, white, middle-class progressives, just like Antifa. Yeah, okay, so this going back to the Gina Carano thing and the cancel culture thing. Yes, as me and Britisher have noted on many occasions, this is primarily a factor of people getting offended on other people's behalf before those people have a chance to be offended.
True, but I also find that there is a sort of a spear point of very, very hardened, militant transgender folk who are out there on the warpath.
Absolutely, and similarly,
you know, I can't help but feel that they more than likely travel around on Twitter with a large section of white middle-class people who are offended on their behalf.
Well, but
there nonetheless seems to be a quite venomous spearhead
yes.
of people who are hunting offence towards themselves, if you know what I mean.
So there are
I think that particular group is especially ferocious.
Well, these people are, you know, you've got the ones who are doing it because they're either unemployed or they've got nothing better to do. And then you have the other ones, the more dangerous ones, who've made it their career, their trans identity, or in any identity, any progressive identity, they've made into their revenue stream. So it becomes impossible for them to detangle themselves from it. Not that I think they want to. I think they love it. And their entire thing.
There are some strange folk out there who can obsess like you can't imagine. I mean, I just came across an example yesterday where I don't know. Are you familiar with Boogie 2988?
Sadly, yes.
He's a sort of, let's say, a sort of larger than life gamer, isn't he?
Yes, he was.
And recently he's kind of talking about how he's been dating and whatever. And there was a photograph, because he's got this dog. He's got a little cute dog. Funnily enough, a lot of people who are online for some reason have to have a pet that they show off every once in a while. But he had this dog, and then he showed a photograph of a woman he'd met on a dating site or whatever. And he wasn't showing her face or anything. It was just basically a shot of the dog in her arms or on her lap or whatever. So most of the picture was filled with the dog, if you know what I mean. Well, these people basically started dissecting this image to kind of work out, are there any identifying criteria on her arm? Is there a partial tattoo visible or anything like that? And then they started scouring dating sites that would pertain to the area in which he lived. Then they managed to track her down and started harassing her and warning her of him, how dangerous he was and whatever. And you just go, that's a lot of time to invest for, for what exactly? And once you realize that there are people who are of that strange mindset, who really don't seem to have much to do with their lives, once they apply themselves to something, be it closing down Miss Carano or whoever else, yes, that's when you realize just how hard a task it is to get rid of them. Sorry, have I bored you to death? Or?
Bored? No. But no, I just think you made a salient point. The which is
you were that surprised of my actually making a point for once.
Well, you do tend to wind your way around the garden path. Some might almost accuse you of following a kind of wood and white picket structure or something like that. I'm not accusing you of fence sitting, but sure. You're no. I think what you said is perfectly salient. There are these kind of in a prime psychological sense, nut jobs, who have nothing better to do and a curious obsession, and also live for the gamified social media world that we currently live in. So they'll do this whether or not there's an incentive in there for them or not, and they're all hopelessly addicted, and that doesn't help as well. When it comes to these people, they are the tip of the spear. And then you have the young white middle class progressives who are, there. But it's also in the sense of this is the way university functions now as well. In a lot of cases, I mean, I sit in things and people talk about, you should consider what the potential findings of your study might do in terms of the ramifications for the communities that you're dealing with or communities associated with this. And I just get, given this is all of the humanities who are thinking like this, and the humanities is, contrary to popular belief, an enormous machine compared to a lot of other courses in university. They will take literally anyone, pretty much. And I say that as someone who is on a humanities course. But it's... and they really emphasize this, and I was kind of horrified. At no point is the search for truth ever kind of highlighted in these, of the fact that you have a responsibility, no matter how hard the truth is, to express it as clearly as possible, so that it cannot be misunderstood, as opposed to going, this will be misunderstood, and therefore what ways will it harm people, and if it will harm too many people you shouldn't say it at all. I don't think that's how science should progress. Not that a lot of the humanities can produce science as a whole.
You know what? Not so obvious. I don't think you should have said that.
Well, probably not, but there we are. Okay. EC90 said, she is so anti-Jew, she is taking money from a Ben. You'll have to elucidate me as to what you mean by that, EC90. I assume you're talking about Gina Carano again there, but I don't know what you're saying there. Anakin Cringewalker says, Business Insider discovered Amazon. Okay, back to Amazon. Amazon is very pro-intersectionality, purely because the division and mistrust it causes prevents unionization. That's a very interesting take. I'd love to actually...
just as a little anecdote there when it comes to Amazon, because I really can sort of, wonder sometimes what have I done with my life. Because I remember years and years back, Bezos being interviewed. And that was sort of when he had started, he was kind of explaining his business, and he sort of said, well, he left his job as wasn't he a trader or something on Wall Street? So he had quite a lot of money. So he had some money he could invest, and he had seen how things were going on the internet, and he wanted a piece of it and wanted to do something. And he had sort of asked himself, well, what can one actually what can one send through the post? Because back then it was nowhere near as well organized now with courier services and whatever. And he fathomed, well, CDs, they don't weigh a lot. We can just stick a CD in a jiffy bag or whatever and send it off like that. So that's really where he started out. And I think when they were interviewing him, by that time he'd moved into books, I think. But he kind of started with CDs, and then he was doing books and whatever, and he was already then sort of seen as the coming thing. But it was nothing like what this monster has become, if you know what I mean. And it's just remarkable to sort of have a memory of something that, now is so gargantuan, then being back in its infancy. And, just to sort of think, well, hang on a moment, I was actually there when he was describing how they put CDs in jiffy bags. And yeah, it's a kind of frightening thought to kind of realise that I've been around for that long.
It's a curious one. I still get stuff from my dad who talks about, he remembers when Bill Gates was working out of a garage, that sort of thing as well.
You can just sort of these are the things you can look forward to, ladies and gentlemen. That something innocuous or whatever. Perhaps this show, in 10, 20 years' time, when we're massive and we've bought out Hollywood, you will still have a faint memory. You won't be able precisely to recall what we did on this show, but you'll remember, having listened to us before we were famous.
We'll be sitting there on our thrones as Sargon Enterprises begs at our feet. No, there may be something innocuous. Like wherever
Sargon Enterprises will never get as far as our feet. He will be at the feet of one of our assistants, who will then report to us what he had been begging about.
Dear God, I hope he never watches this. No, it's a curious thing as well, because I don't know where this show will go, particularly post May. When I have to get a real job. I hope that I'll be able to continue it and so on. And there are a lot of things in the work, and but a YouTube channel as a whole is a curious one. I've been doing very little, you'll have noticed, to actually grow the channel of late. In fact, we've shrunk by somewhat, about 250 people in the last couple of months. So, which is quite demoralising.
It would be a mistake. I think it would be a mistake to be planning anything anyway, because the way things are, the the sword of Damocles could fall at any moment, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, yes, but no,
you never really know whether when you switch on the computer in the morning, whether you've actually still got a channel or not.
True, but I don't think that I'm in any danger of that happening to me at the moment, although I'm certainly on a list, right? But what I'm trying to say, before anyone gets scared that this show is somehow going away suddenly very soon, is there are no plans to cancel it as of yet. So hopefully it'll be fun, and we'll keep going, and I can keep this up, and because I enjoy doing it, and Britisher, despite all of his complaining, damn it, he enjoys it too. So we'll keep on producing. But yes, when it comes to Business Insider discovering that Amazon is pro-intersectionality because the division and mistrust prevents unionization, I would say that I'm not surprised. I will ask my inner contact at Amazon about their thought about this. That'll be curious. Someone has joined the Discord under the name Uwuisha, and their profile picture is that jar picture. Britisher, I hope you're happy.
I hate you.
So, EC90's comment about Ben is referring to Ben Shapiro. Gina Carano is now doing work with Ben Shapiro's film production company, apparently. So that'll be interesting to see where that goes.
Oh, well, in that case, I mean, she's clearly a Nazi.
Yeah, she's so anti-Semitic. She's working heavily with Jewish-owned business. The Civic Nationalist says, I'd rather don't care about people's rights. Freedom of the individual gives everyone the freedom to do as they wish, so long as they harm none. That's like what you're describing there. To me, seems a bit like the non-aggression principle from libertarian thought there. And rights being rights are very specific things. At the end of the day, it's like you need to have a trade-off between freedom and security, because there's a lot which goes on which you need to safeguard your borders. They need to be defined. You need to safeguard the population. You need laws. You need to be able to prevent kind of exploitation to a degree, violence, and so on and so forth. So the freedom of the individual, yes, within reason, and this is why politics has become so hazy, because has been for time immemorial, right? These are questions which have vexed humanity from the beginning of state enterprises and all sorts, about how best that we can regulate these things, and also how much that people are willing to tolerate in terms of their freedoms being imposed. How do we influence the children in order to have the best outcomes, to prepare them for life in this world, as the Conservatives would say, and to make them conform to our policies and will, as the left would say. Sorry, no, that's a misrepresentation. Both sides say that. So it's a curious one, and unfortunately, as I've not prepped for that question this evening, it's been a long time since I've dealt with it. Actually, I don't feel compelled to bring more than that. Any other comments on that, Britisher?
No.
So there we go. EC90 says Texas could experience blackouts. Oh yes, because Texas is frozen at the moment. 50% of the wind turbines are frozen solid. Yes, I saw this. The electricity costs have spiked to the highest cost ever for the state. And yes, there's a lot of riffraff going around on Twitter screaming about how the helicopters are spraying petrol-based de-icers onto the wind turbines, and so they're going, oh yeah, a fossil fuel created device powered by fossil fuels sprays fossil fuels onto fossil fuel produced energy output, energy collection device, or something like that. And it's wordy, and the left can't meme, but I look at that and I just go, nuclear. Like there seems to be this thing about with green technologies that people have decided that wind and solar are the only options and that sort of thing. But also there's this kind of failure to recognise as well, I think, if I can steel man the climate activists a little bit, there's a little bit of a failure to recognise from the right and from the kind of more anti-climate agenda chaps that it is well recognised that wind turbines and solar panels, etc., don't work all of the time. I just think that most of the population is illiterate on how much they produce, and no one's really familiar with the figures and mixed energy production and why you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. Yes, the wind turbines aren't working, you need to be maintained. Is there an issue with them in the way that they're constructed? Texas, I imagine, wasn't planning for this sort of thing, but at the same time, are the hydroelectric power plants working? Is there nuclear power as an option? Is there, where are the other energy sources? How's that going, etc.? Go on.
I mean, I think, I take your point. I think this is it's a good point that basically, we all know that these technologies aren't going to work 100% of the time. I think what makes this an interesting case is that at the very time when you would need the electricity most, that's when the flaming thing isn't working. So that there is a certain, how should we say, comedic touch to it, isn't there?
So yeah, there's the other addition. And the issue which people aren't really touching on, which is storage. So have these. What is the output of these wind turbines into storage? In fact, the entire energy economy over there that is doing it. Have they put too much of a focus on wind energy? And of course now they're saying the fuel price, the electricity price has jumped by over thousands of percent over the course of the last few days, which is not something the average consumer is going to have be accounting for, right? So you need to have these different methods of producing it. As I say, I think nuclear is the way forward, particularly thorium power stations, and that's really about it. Really, I think wind turbines, some people love the look of them, some people think they're an eyesore. Some of them produce enough, if they're placed correctly, produce enough energy. Others don't. It's just one of those things.
There is one great hope, and that is for the last 35 years or so, we've been 20 years away from fusion. So.
Oh yes. And then we had that cold fusion malarkey in the bit.
Oh yes, that one was especially interesting. Let's put it like that.
Well, I mean, they literally just had broken instruments and somehow have spawned this idea that cold fusion could be a reality. Anyway, let us not get into the energy. Neither of us qualified.
Yes, but hadn't they won a Nobel or something by the time that it was actually established that it didn't work?
No, they went very excited. I don't think they won a Nobel, but they possibly
won something.
They might be shortlisted. But cold fusion, I remember they got very excited and they ran to the papers and so on. History, here we go. So, where's this now? In the late 1920s, Friedrich Panath and Kurt Peters originally reported the transformation of hydrogen into helium by nuclear catalysis, when hydrogen was absorbed by finely divided palladium at room temperature. However, this was retracted later on. So that's the one I'm thinking of. But I can't see anything else. Cold fusion was used in 1956 on a couple of different things.
I do remember a case where it's more than likely the one you're talking about, where one thought one had a major breakthrough in cold fusion, and
the most famous
it sort of went ballistic, and by the time the whole thing kind of, oh well, no, it doesn't work, it was already too late. Everybody had already been doing the great huzzah, if you know what I mean.
The most famous cold fusion claims were made by Stanley Pons and Martin Fleischmann in '89. After a brief period of interest their reports were called into question by nuclear physicists. They never retracted their claims, but did move to France. So that was
1989. That might be in the right time period that I'm talking about. But then again, my
basically,
memory is a little too hazy, and I'm not googling at the moment.
No.
I'm just
So
talking off the top of my head.
You're probably thinking of this announcement, which was made in mid-March of '89. There were 2 research teams. They were ready to publish their findings. They'd agreed to meet at an airport to send their papers to Nature, which is one of the biggest journals. They were also pressured by the University of Utah, which wanted to establish priority on the discovery. So there was a big press conference by University of Utah claiming that it would be published in Nature, and then Nature rejected the paper, so it was actually submitted to the Journal of Electroanalytical Chemistry, and there were loads of issues there as well, and which is all going on. Anyway, that's just a bit of interesting history for those of you who are interested in cold fusion. EC90 said, oh no, we've already had that one. Autocharth said, did you ever expect to be bellowing, "You're a time traveller, you have no excuse," at a sickly geriatric? Also, rewatched Hot Fuzz due to Mauler, amazing. Well, Britisher, first off, what do you say to being described as a sickly geriatric?
I mean, given recent record, I can't really quarrel with that, can I?
Being a man of somewhat advanced years in the thousands of years, as we all know, but I don't know if I'd describe you as geriatric. Sickly, yes. Sick in the mind, crazy, kind of insanity, perhaps, sectionable.
I understand how you would draw from the fact that I come on here every week that I am completely insane.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
exactly.
I
That is
could
one
see
of the.
how you would draw that entirely logical conclusion.
You take so much abuse on this show; it's just ridiculous. As for Hot Fuzz, yeah, fantastic film. I watched, but it's a bit ruined for me, Hot Fuzz, because my roommate, when I was going through, I was injured in the Air Force, and I had to go into a dual room with a colleague of mine who was also injured, and he used to watch Hot Fuzz whilst he did his ironing every single day for months and months months, and he would literally parrot the lines in real time whilst watching the thing. He could have played every single character in that film at the same time. In his mind,
he was Timothy Dalton. Yes,
and it was just ludicrous. So whilst I do enjoy the film from time to time, it does drive me a little bit mad if I remember that period of history. We do appear to be joined by Poe the Person, a surprise guest. Good evening.
Hello. Sorry. I was just listening to the stream and thought I'd jump on just in case you were running out of things to say, because I've got a bone to pick with the Britisher.
We're not running out necessarily of things to say, but if you have a bone to pick with the Britisher, have it out. Internet blood sports. It's coming to you. Internet blood sports every week. There we go. Go on.
Sorry about the background noise, guys. Yeah, the Britisher. I love your videos. I watch the Week It Was every Monday morning. It brightens up the fact that I have to
there is a
start a new week.
But
dude, you gotta let it go. It feels like at the start of every video you do now, there's like a 5-minute soapbox where you've got to complain about the comments. Where I really just want to hear your opinions about things, not you addressing the controversy about your own opinions.
Get wrecked.
Okay.
People are,
so maybe I could have.
People are having less of an issue.
What exactly do you expect me to reply?
People have less of an issue with this line of questioning and more with my jingle about internet blood sports that I created on the spot.
I liked that.
Amazing.
That was a brilliant jingle.
I don't know. Well, British, there you go. You've been told now by the representative of your audience that
it's going to be a 10-minute opening next time.
It's going to be 10 minutes. There we go. Oh, well, you could join us.
It's your video.
You can join us as we go through the rest of everything. But yes, I'm sure the British will take on board this feedback and completely ignore it.
That's just I'm just abusing my privilege as I'm just abusing my the opportunity that I had. I saw the opportunity to jump on and to hijack the whole stream and get the British right in front of my face to tell him what I think of him. It's not a privilege that I enjoy with many YouTubers when I've got something to say to them.
Just hovering over my power to disconnect you from the call there, Poe. So just watch what you say. In an act of pure misogyny, obviously, I would just disconnect you.
Obviously.
Well, I mean, we have established that it's hard to shut women up when they start.
Oh my god!
You can do whatever you want with your channel, Britisher. I'm just airing my grievances, but ultimately it's your channel. You can do whatever you like. I'll still be tuning in. Don't worry.
And that's what he relies on. There we go. Right. Okay. This I have to rename this stream now, as Right Honourable Fairs says in chat, as Poe the person destroys in all caps the Britisher. And so on. So, are we currently experiencing, as Steve Woodmansey in chat says, Poe's commentary on the British commentary on Britishers' comments?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad someone spotted that irony.
Yes. Okay, let's crack on. Anakin Cringewalker says, when all the colours of the rainbow unite, it's a straight white line. Unite the rainbow, multiracial whiteness today, all are welcome. That definitely won't be clipped out of context, will it? Thank you, Anakin Cringewalker. Cultural homogeneity basically guarantees stability and not stagnation, so that's an interesting thing. Mr. Gently Benevolent says, Uwuisha ho, with an Uwuisha emote in there. Certainly more moral than a pig in a thong. When can I get my Uwuisha mug? Well, now
I'm getting worried once they start calling me ho.
The Britisher, you are the ho. Yes, indeed. All this time, they've been saying Britisher ho. It's not been hello. It's not been ho Britisher. It's Britisher. You are a ho. Naturally. So we could put it on a mug. We could put it on a T-shirt. I'm sure. And see if people are interested in that sort of thing. Type 1 in the chat if you're interested in getting in a Wooisher merch, and we'll see what we can do about that. EC90, referring to the towns that we were talking about earlier, where we went off on our tangent about Jamshedpur and Tata and all that and stuff. So EC90 says, they built these towns from Christian beliefs to provide healthcare, good education, and housing for the poor. It was from these Methodist and Presbyterian industrialists Abur and Co-op formed. I'm not familiar with Abur, but Co-op, yes, obviously am. And I would say to that, I don't think that especially the uber wealthy do things out of a pure profit motive. I mean, there's certainly evidence that they do the exact opposite. And what we end.
I mean, when it comes to those towns, Saltaire and whatever, there was definitely a philanthropic ideal behind it.
Yes, if only from like an arrogant, a kind of narcissistic point of view, where you're like, anything you can do, I can do better, right? And so these kind of pet projects, effectively.
So I mean, when you eventually end up creating something that turns into a UNESCO World Heritage Site, you must have done something right.
Yeah. I think so.
But when you then suddenly realise he put everything there, a church, a school, everything except a pub, that's when you go, aha.
Yes, there's a slightly censorious nature there, but I mean, did he? I don't know. I don't know whether or not a pub was subsequently built, or if it was just banned outright. So I will just stop with that. Or if it's not like it was an alcohol-free zone. Just didn't build a pub. Mad Beast Yeti says, news from Canada: Liberals in Newfoundland Newfoundland, have cancelled all in-person voting for the current provincial election. Well, that'll be a curious one, won't it? You just can't trust anything that comes. Like this, when it comes to the voting practices thing, it should never be. The postal vote should never be something which is the primary means of voting. It just shouldn't. You may as well run an internet poll. That's it's got just as much validity as something like that. There's no protection. It's obscene.
Well, I guess we just live in somewhat exceptional times. I doubt they will maintain that once the pandemic is over.
We shall see. We shall see.
I don't know if just to steelman the opposition, as you like to do. I understand your concern. In-person voting does have a certain security about it, but I don't see any intrinsic reason why it should be safer, than other forms of voting. The only thing that prevents you voting in person twice, let's say, is the fact that the person at the booth might recognize you, or but then you can just go to a different region.
You're referring to here. Where we have a very much a trust-centered system. But personally, I have absolutely no issues really with mandating ID to vote. I mean, especially given that it's just something which everyone has now. There's no excuse not to have ID, as it were.
Okay, but even for something like that, you no longer have to see anyone in person to get a passport, and so you're getting this sense of security from a piece of identification, when really that piece of identification isn't using any. That's not using a form of what do you call it? Authentication that you recognize as being intrinsically secure, like face-to-face interactions.
Okay. Well, it's more secure in the sense that just if I'm getting the cost correct, just going by the last time I had my passport done, it costs £65 every time. So
true.
I'd rather that the cost to commit fraud be very much higher and therefore much easier to track and trace as well, as it were. Track and trace. Oh, for goodness sake. But be much harder to pull up than say ballot harvesting, where you just pay for ballots and en masse, nice and cheap. It just makes a lot more sense to me that to have an ID which presumably has some ratifying protocols in and of itself. There are some checks that will have to go through behind closed doors. In order to get it approved, you have to fill out the requisite forms. There is a paper trail for you getting it, and you must be a citizen in order to obtain it, presumably. So it's like, I feel that's oodles more secure, shall we say, oodles being a proper defined measurement, than simply being able to walk into somewhere, vote, and then walking to a different polling station and vote again.
Yeah, no, I just I think there's a kind of irony to the idea that your passport, which, as you say, does cost £65 or £70, which is kind of a barrier to getting it, but your passport is kind of it's the epitome of self-identification, of authentication of your own, of yourself, and yet you can apply for a passport online and do the entire process without having to see anyone.
It's also a matter of the actual documentation of a passport in and of itself. Admiral Bees in chat says election fraud should require a greater technological investment than a photocopier, right? So I feel like that's also a very relevant point. When it comes to the fraud happening on and just as you say, shards of pottery, paper ballots, that sort of thing. These things are much more difficult to and require much more investment and physical investment than than the digital systems which currently dominate America and other parts of the world. I know this one's from Canada. I don't know whether or not they do paper slips or and proper postal ballots, which are again on paper, or whether or not they have digital systems either. But regardless, I look at this and I go, I do not want this to be a precedent that is set across the world, and a move that we are making where we are basically beholden to a system which in and of itself has been proven to be significantly more vulnerable. It is more convenient for the people running the election, but it is significantly more vulnerable, and everything's a trade-off between freedom, comfort, and security. And I don't want the comfort to get to such a place where the security is completely compromised. It's ridiculous.
But I don't think in this case it's necessarily comfort, is it?
No.
It's not really that they're setting it up for convenience's sake.
No, they'll claim that it is convenience, and therefore it's incentivizing.
No, I think they're claiming it's due to COVID.
Yeah, but the general use of these things before the pandemic, right? Because these things existed before the pandemic, was that it's a convenience measure, right? It's you can't get to the polling station on polling day, so you use this convenience measure in order to vote. And I think that because it is a convenience measure, it should not, if you get to the point where over more than a tiny fraction of your population is voting via postal vote, you need to seriously reevaluate the postal vote in and of itself, because they looked at it and they say, well, there's only a margin for about 2.75% of postal. I'm just pulling these numbers out of thin air. 2.75% of postal votes being open to fraud. 2 to 3%, and then you go, yeah, but only 2 to 3% of the population actually votes via postal vote, and therefore 2% to 2% is this tiny fraction, and we don't really need to worry about that influencing a whole election. Whereas when it becomes 15%, 30%, 100%, then all of a sudden that 3% swing is a lot more meaningful. But yes, there we go. Yeah, just going to move on now. So that Indian dude says, whenever I read about Timur or Genghis, especially Timur was a master at this, during a battle he was able to turn an enemy general to his side in a crucial moment of battle. Completely apart from anything we've been discussing this evening, any comments from the Britisher?
Well, being able to change a general of the opposing side to your own isn't really a battle tactic. It's just that if you have managed to do that in advance of the battle occurring, because it's not that they've changed their mind during the battle. I mean, surely that's already arranged in advance. So I don't think Timur basically changed people's minds during battles. I think it will have been that he basically already had a scheme going with a particular general on the other side. Wasn't there a famous British battle, the name of which, of course, now escapes me, in India, where one of the Indian warlords, came up with the Maharaja in question or whatever, but then his troops didn't move during the battle, and eventually it became clear that he had changed sides with the British. So, these things have happened throughout time, but I don't think it's a specific tactic.
There you go. I have nothing to say on this, as I know very little about Timur or Genghis. So, there we go. Any comment from you, Poe?
They were charming pacifist types. I mean, as you know nothing about them.
Yes.
They were very, very easygoing chaps. Everything was diplomacy.
They sounded. Artful Lodger says, with the French showering at night, won't we have load diversity anyway? With the French showering at night, won't we have load diversity anyway? What?
I think that refers to the load on the on the system for power. So with most people showering in the morning and the French showering at night, wouldn't that spread the load anyway?
I mean,
think that's the point being made.
We were talking about Texas, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, you know, I'm sure there are a great many French people living in Texas. So much so that they would actually be significant when it comes to energy use.
I don't know, but anything that inconveniences the French is something I can get behind. That's all I'll say.
So basically, your argument is use up all the energy in the morning by showering extra long, so there's none left for the French when they want to have a shower in the evening.
No more 5-minute showers. In the morning, you must take at least 20. It's as simple as that. No,
I'm glad we cleared that up.
No free showers for the French. I want you to get that hashtag going on Twitter. No free showers for the
cold
French.
Showers only for the French.
Cold shower French or something like that, right?
Jokes aside, it does raise a very valid point about the spikiness of energy use. The fact that when you wake up in the morning, you might have a hot shower, you might boil the kettle and put your toaster on for your morning toast all at the same time, and the rest of the country is doing that all in the same hour and a half period between 6:30 and 8. And it's a huge spike compared to the rest of the day when other electrical sources kind of a much flatter curve that's sort of easier to use renewable energy for instance.
Poe is setting herself up as sort of the anti-Jordan Peterson. She is telling the rest of the world to get up late in order to save the world energy-wise.
Are you saying that she might be Porden Jeterson?
Precisely. That's exactly what I'm saying.
I'm just... I'm sorry.
You're just improvising, aren't you, now? Yes.
Well, I shouldn't. Mr. Wilbitar says, which bit is Poe mad at again? And will there be a fully edited video consisting of only these parts?
I mean, the Britishers' videos, I expect.
Yeah.
I mean, no doubt I'll have to, because it's now deemed a highlight.
You'll have to take your last 10 videos, Britisher, and only the rants about the comments, and string them together into a series of contained rants, and then make that into a 20-minute snapshot of your channel. And then you could use that as your channel trailer, and then that trailer will go viral, and then everyone will rally to your side, and suddenly you'll have raised £100,000.
The next thing I know, Disney will be cancelling me. Yes.
And then you'll have raised £100,000 on GoFundMe, and you'll have legal representation, and then you'll win that legal battle, and then the Britisher brand will take over a small township in the southwest of Yorkshire, and then who knows where it could possibly go? Sorry,
Miramax will buy the movie rights.
Britisher Air.
Britisher Air.
By the way, like Saltaire.
Yes, I did get that. Yes, but I also thought that it might be an amusing name for an air freight company.
An airline. Yes. Mr. Will Guitar. By the way, you have a link. I hope it will mean something to him. You know that I'm not just talking in code now.
Sorry, say again.
I was just saying to Mr. Will Guitar that I have sent him a link.
Ooh. Oh, Britisher, what you do in the privacy of your own bedroom, could you just keep it out of?
It's always very worrying. I know.
Yes, keep it off the stream. You know, we wouldn't want to be demonetized or anything like that.
It's just Mr. Will Guitar and my it's our joint Magnum PI fetish. You see.
Are there mustaches involved?
No, of course.
Are you mustache jousting with Mr. Will Guitar, Britisher?
Well, I mean, that would be telling. Especially as I have absolutely no idea what mustache jousting is, but...
I think we all know what mustache jousting really is for the Britisher, ladies and gentlemen. And I shall leave it to your interpretation. Jedi Knight Annie Cringewalker says, "Ooh woo, Mr. NSO. Won't you please spread the load?" No. That's what I say to that. But thank you for making me say such a degenerate text, Annie Cringe-Walker.
Yes, this is taking a strange turn, isn't it?
Meanwhile, the chat is much more, balanced than we are. Mentioning, there are, there's a Paris in Texas and that sort of thing. Okay, you may have noticed that the name of this stream is Turf Paint Edition. Are you aware of why this is, Mr. Bridger?
It's not.
Let me use the. Sorry, I keep forgetting you're here, Poe. Are you aware?
I can leave if you like.
No, that's not what I meant. I just saying. If I pop up this on.
You just missed your opportunity to say "get out."
No. Oh, I don't want her to get out. So there you go. Share. I will share my screen on here for you. And so if you click on my person in the Discord, you can click watch stream, and you will be able to see this abomination of a video that is going at the moment that I have going on there. So this is organic turf painting, and they are literally spraying green paint onto the lawn to make the lawns look more verdant. And
I think I've seen this before, and it was fake. And what they're actually doing is blasting dust off of the grass. Maybe the sun.
I mean, yeah,
they must have better fact checkers than me. But
that bastion of faint, that bastion of stellar reporting. But no, this does appear to be. I mean, he's spraying green from his thing.
You're
right. I see it.
I have seen occasions when basically lawns have been sprayed green. And that was usually when royal visits or state visits. I think the last time I heard it was happening was it when Trump visited India? I'm not sure. And they sort of sprayed patches of dried out grass green, everything to make the course travelled by the president to whatever mansion he was going to meet the Indian president, anything to make it look perfect. Mm-hmm. So much so, I believe they also put up a wall barring the sight of a shanty town as he drove past. But no, I've heard that in several places that they've sprayed the ground green in order to make things look better, but usually always in the context of state visits. No doubt someone has now taken that idea further.
As I understand it, the reason for this, as I'm told, is that water restrictions in some states mean many can't actually water their lawns, so they don't need to paint them. And I'm just going, if you live in a place where your lawn is going to die because there's not enough water to keep it alive, maybe have a rockery? I don't know. Just see
a Zen garden?
Something, there's plenty of other things that you could do, but literally painting your grass? That's just this is insane. It's a pure aesthetic choice I find deeply degenerate and immoral. So it's the
epitome of the short-term, what do you call it, a low time preference, because if you put the time in ahead of time, it'd probably be cheaper to water the grass and just wait a week until it turns green, or a few weeks. But instead what you're doing is probably killing the grass with green paint so that it will never be properly green again.
Well, they're claiming that the water restriction has been they can't water the lawns, etc. And I'm just going.
Well, fair enough, yeah.
So
is this a kind of equivalent of a hose pipe ban, really?
Yes.
So for this particular summer, they can't water the grass, so the grass dies. So we spray it green, and then next year we may have to seed it again. Although I assume it will more than likely be friendly paint, because
it's organic paint, degradable paint. It doesn't appear to harm the grass itself, but my point is you can't.
Yes, at some point, when the hose pipe ban stops, you can actually start watering again, and then you just take it from there.
We have another story which Britisher you've definitely heard before, as you retweeted it earlier this week. Again, I'm now streaming that. In fact, I'll pop it up on the old OBS. So this is
Jacob
Rees-Mogg waxing lyrical about Weetabix, and let no one who has watched this complain that we do not have a serious parliament once again.
One of the debates that has been dividing the nation this week, perhaps even more divisive than Brexit has been over the years, is whether having Weetabix with baked beans is an attractive serving suggestion for a healthy meal. Now, we all need a little light relief in these difficult times, so maybe have a debate on breakfast cereals and their contribution to a healthy diet, so that we can all arrive at the shared position that with whatever it is served, Weetabix is a great British breakfast cereal, fully worthy of promotion.
Milk. Mr. Speaker, as they used to say, Weetabix are unbeatabix. My personal preference, if I were to eat Weetabix, is not with baked beans, which I've always thought absolutely disgusting. There was an advert. Well, I'm sorry.
Can we just be clear? Like, who here has eaten Weetabix with baked beans?
I can say I have not.
I
don't think anyone has.
I have never ever heard of anyone having Weetabix with baked beans or any or any.
You've seen.
Have I seen what?
On Twitter, there was a segment on Popular Opinions about it last week, the day that it went viral. It's just viral marketing, basically. Weetabix posted a cursed image that they knew people would share to get them to, get Weetabix back on the lips of the British Parliament of all people.
Okay.
And you're buying into it.
I see. He goes on to basically say that Weetabix is unbeatabix with hot milk and brown sugar, although Paddington Bear was onto something with all that marmalade. He liked Nanny's marmalade on toast because Jacob Rees-Mogg is a strong believer in nannies. So it was just one of these bizarre things. I don't know what section of Parliament this was or why it came up in particular, but I'm like, clearly
it's the same thing.
Something has gone wrong.
It's the same thing. It's basically parliamentarians doing exactly the same thing as Weetabix just has done. So they have now created their own viral content, which they too know will then be carried on from there.
Yeah, but
Jacob Rees-Mogg knows full well that he is now going to be talked about throughout the nation.
But people are just like, I mean, I get that it's deliberately antagonistic, and there are going to be people who are supporters of Rees-Mogg, etc., and who do this. But like, it's just like, I just imagine that so many people are going to just be pissed off at this. Just that the fact, I mean, there are people who go, "Oh, he's a snob and proud," but other people, there's one thing for him to say this on his own time. But when it's in a parliamentary session, the fact that this has even been raised, and then he's given this kind of meme retort as well, is just surreal. It's just a very surreal situation to be in.
It's a bit. It's a bizarre time we live in.
Maybe there's just a reason I'm not in politics, right? It's just.
I often.
Not for me.
I follow the YouTube, there's a YouTube channel for I think it's called UK Parliament, and you can watch. Yeah, they post all of the live streams, and you can watch them back after the fact. And I often put them on in the background at 1.25 speed, and it's amazing how much time they waste in the chamber. It's the Weetabix is unbeatabix is not nearly the closest, to the most ridiculous thing I've heard, or the biggest waste of time that I've seen in Parliament. But I also follow Jacob Rees-Mogg on Twitter, and he is quite fond of, his little jokes and his little cultural references that, he's playing into the meme about himself.
Of course, I don't think he could be any other way.
Yeah, it's not a bad way to market yourself, as the Britisher says. But he brought up Peppa Pig in a session a few weeks ago, or maybe it was a few months ago, even quite a long time ago now. But that was in relation to the puddle jumping competition that was cancelled due to COVID. And he brought up the well-known fact that Peppa Pig and her family love to jump in muddy puddles, which any viewer of Peppa Pig will be very intimately aware. So I actually did quite enjoy that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. But yeah, I think with that we're going to round out for the evening. I did have a couple of stories that I wanted to talk about, but I think don't quote me on this. I may turn these into individual videos of them by themselves. One is, there's the Trump acquittal thing, which I think there's not much really for us to say on this other than the American media is slurring him as the most well, not just the American media. The media in general is slurring him as the most impeached president in US history, and realistically, he's the most acquitted president in US history by that very metric.
It's factually correct, isn't it?
Yes. So there's that whole angle, but I actually think there's very little substance to this. It's a last swipe at him. The people who are actually going to suffer from this, or quote suffer, the people who will have political damage done to them over this are the dissenters, the ones who voted to acquit him. They're the ones who are being gunned for now because Trump is...
No, it's not. It's the dissenters. It's the ones who basically voted to convict him, not the ones who voted to acquit him.
Oh, really?
Sure.
No, because I've seen Nancy Pelosi has is going on the warpath, condemning everyone who voted to acquit Donald Trump. And saying, what we saw in the Senate today was a cowardly group of Republicans who apparently have no options because they were afraid to defend their job, respect the institution in which they serve. So,
yes, but what I mean is those people who are now in danger of, deselection or whatever, will be the ones who basically defied the Republican majority, surely.
Yeah, but those people are, were never going to be in the running in the first place, right? Or they're Democrats anyway.
How do you mean?
The people who dissented on this thing I will have dissented for a reason, and it won't have been out of the goodness of their heart.
I think can we clarify? And when we say dissent, I mean the ones who had the dissenting view, who basically would be the minority, that would be the majority of the Republicans. But what I'm talking about is those who basically dissented with their party's majority, because the Democrats, they voted unanimously.
Yes.
But on the Republican side, there was a minority that voted with the Democrats.
Yes.
So they would effectively be the ones dissenting within their own party. Now, surely they're the ones who are in trouble.
Yeah, they know what they were doing. They're Democrats in all but name, and off they go. They can go join the Democrat Party.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. Maybe they also just thought he needed convicting.
Yes, and they're entitled to think that. They'd be wrong, of course, but
well, yes, no. It just, always remember from where we came. I mean, your point was the ones who were in trouble. I don't think that the overwhelming majority of Republican senators will now be in trouble because Nancy Pelosi is on the warpath.
I think those people...
I think if anybody really is in trouble, it will be those who defied the Republican majority.
I see what you're saying. My response to that is they will have known what they were doing when they chose to dissent, and they will either make or break their career on the way that they respond to the interrogation that they are no doubt undergoing now by their fellow Republicans, etc., and the way they resonate with the rest of the public. They've made their choice and their decision, and they'll play the political game now. But I think that this decision will come back again to bite the Republicans in the next election, as the Democrats will basically call the Republicans, as they always do, and I appreciate that the narrative isn't going to change all that much, as the apologists for the American Hitler that we just about got rid of in 2020, as they will define it. So But I think that, yeah, those people are always going to be on attack. I see your point, Britisher. I'm just waffling in my own way around the point for that. But the other story I wanted to, that I'll make a video on, is the possibly make a video on, is the do not resuscitate notices which have been given to COVID patients with disabilities. So they're just basically en masse blanket gave DNR orders to people with everything from learning disabilities to actual severe physical disabilities. But some people appear to just have been, you have been marked as having a learning disability, do not resuscitate. And of course this is causing a huge amount of trouble, especially within disabled talk online, and obviously I'm quite connected up with a lot of that, so it's interesting to see that. Okay, so I will bring the stream to an end there, but because there's much more to say on that topic, and we don't have time today. But it's a pleasure to have provided fake accents to you all this evening. Thank you very much to Poe for jumping in at the end, even if it was only to character assassinate the Britisher.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a bit of a surprise to me that you let me on. I was just kind of expecting to sort of haunt the chat for a little while and and probe, but just, thank you anyway.
No problem. And thank you, of course, to the Britisher for suffering through my insufferable, hateful attitude and rhetoric for this entire stream, as always.
I feel assassinated.
As always. Good night to everybody. Have a fantastic week. Please stay safe. And I will see you all, hopefully, next Monday. Take care and have a great week. Bye-bye.
Have a good one.
Good night.
Have a good one, Britisher. No toodle pip.